Every single story you're about to hear are inspired by true events. They've been researched and confirmed, and they'll make you question what's lurking just outside your door. You'll never look at the shadows the same way again. On the road, you can go 1,000,000 miles without a problem. But on mile 1,000,001, your luck can run out. For Turner, his luck ran out just after midnight on a dead quiet stretch of Interstate 80. He'd just left a truck stop in Iowa, feeling good after a hot meal. A fresh Red Bull sweating in his cup holder. The familiar rumble of the engine was the only sound for miles. With his refrigerated trailer holding its temperature, he felt in control. That feeling of being in control lasted for about 20 minutes. He spotted the car in his rear view, just a pair of old, round headlights hanging back in the dark. It was a Ford Crown Victoria, a big-body sedan, the kind unmarked units used to drive. Then it did something wrong. The headlights just blinked out, leaving nothing. A second later, the car's grille lit up with the silent, strobing flash of red and blue. No siren. Nothing. Just those blinking lights, ordering him to the side of the road. The silence was louder and more unnerving than any siren would have been. Turner pulled the rig onto the gravel shoulder. He watched in the side mirror as the Crown Vic's door opened with a low groan of tired metal. The man who got out wasn't in uniform, just dark civilian clothes, which wasn't unusual for an undercover cop. A badge hung from a chain around his neck. He walked toward the truck with a weird, determined pace, but his head was on a swivel, his eyes darting into the black fields like he was looking for someone. A sharp, hollow rap on the window made Turner jump. He lowered it, and the cool night air hit his face. The man asked for his license and registration, his voice totally flat. A knot tightened in Turner's gut. He noticed a small, strange detail right away. The man wasn't holding a flashlight. He was using the darkness, like he didn't want Turner to get a good look at his face. The cop started asking questions, but they weren't typical questions. Where you headed? Anyone else in the truck with you? Does anyone know your route tonight? Each question was a clear signal that this was not a simple traffic stop. This was an interrogation. He was checking to see just how alone Turner was out here. Then the man said, "I need you to step out of the vehicle." Every instinct screamed no, but you don't argue with a cop on the side of a dark highway. Turner just wanted it to be over. He complied. His boots crunched loud on the gravel. The man glanced at the reefer. "Open the back. I need to inspect the cargo." Turner's hands felt cold as he worked the latch on the heavy trailer doors. They swung open with a metallic bang, showing the stacks of sealed boxes inside. The cop took one quick look, then his eyes went blank. He'd lost interest. "Never mind," he said, his voice now a low, raspy whisper. "I want to check the cab instead." Panic, cold and sharp, shot through Turner. "You wait here," the man ordered. The keys were in the ignition. This officer was about to get into his truck, his home, while he was left outside. Turner moved closer to the driver's side door, planting his feet, ready to act. The man climbed in. From the ground, Turner could see his outline in the faint glow of the dash lights. He wasn't really searching. He just sat there and put his hand on the steering wheel, his eyes distant, almost unfocused. He was in a zoned-out state, looking around the cab, not like a cop, but like someone clumsily testing out a potential getaway vehicle. In that moment, watching the man's blank stare, Turner knew. This wasn't a real inspection. This person, whoever he was, wasn't even a good criminal. He was something else, something dangerously unpredictable. The thought hit him like a shock. Get him outside. "Hey, what is that?" Turner yelled, pointing down the highway into the solid black. The man's head snapped around. "What?" he barked, his voice suddenly irritated, his trance broken. "Down there," Turner said, his own voice shaky but loud. "Is that another one of your cars?" The change was instant. The blank look was gone, replaced by wide-eyed panic. He stared down the empty, dark road and saw something that wasn't there. He scrambled out of the cab, his movements clumsy. For a moment, he just stood on the gravel, his cool demeanor shattered. He tried to play it off smooth, forcing a calm he didn't feel. "I'm going to check my radio," he said, his voice a little too high. "Make sure that's not one of my buddies." The act lasted only a second. His fake calm collapsed completely. Without another word, he hurried the rest of the way to the Crown Vic and slammed the door shut. The engine roared to life, the headlights flashed on, and the car pulled away, its red taillights shrinking until they just disappeared into the black. The second the taillights were gone, Turner didn't waste a moment. He scrambled back into his cab, heart pounding. What the hell was I doing? The thought screamed in his head as he hit the locks, the loud click echoing in the small space. He was scared, nervous, but most of all, he was ashamed of himself. He frantically checked the sleeper berth, listening hard for any sound. Nothing. He grabbed the passenger side seatbelt and buckled it into the empty seat, his hands shaking. He was just trying to secure the scene, to do something. His mind kept replaying it. The real scary part wasn't the guy. It was that he, a veteran driver, had let him get in the truck in the first place. He'd opened his own door. He felt stupid, and he felt watched. For the rest of the night, every pair of headlights that popped up in his mirrors was going to be him coming back. The road ahead was dark, and he still had a long, long way to go. Mark heard the hiss of air brakes, a normal sound for a truck stop. But this was different. It was late, and the parking lot was mostly empty, with just a few other trucks humming quietly in the dark. He glanced at his side mirror and watched a deep green truck pull into the space right next to him. It parked close, closer than it needed to be. Something about the sound, and how close the truck was, felt wrong. It felt intentional. The whole thing had started so innocently a few months prior. The loneliness of a long-haul route is a heavy thing, a silence that presses in on you after hundreds of miles of empty highway. Mark was scanning through the crackle of the CB radio, mostly hearing arguments and nonsense, when a clear voice cut through the static. He called himself Charger. He was easy to understand and made sense, unlike most of the guys on the radio. For the next hour, they just talked. They talked about the terrible coffee at a stop back in Ohio, a dispatcher they both disliked, and the feeling of missing their kids' birthdays. For the first time in a long time, the cab of Mark's truck didn't feel so empty. Over the next few weeks, talking to Charger was a good way to pass the long hours. He was a genuinely helpful guy. He'd give Mark a heads up about a speed trap over the next hill or a way station that was unexpectedly open. He shared stories about his own kids, and he sounded like a decent, hard-working man just trying to get by, same as Mark. He seemed like a good guy. Mark was sure of it. About a month into their radio friendship, Charger mentioned he was pulling into the same major truck stop as Mark for his 34-hour reset. For the first time, they met in person. Charger was exactly as he sounded, friendly with an easy smile. He insisted on buying Mark dinner. They sat in a vinyl booth for hours, eating steak and mashed potatoes. It was easy to talk to him in person, and it was a relief to have a real conversation with someone who understood the job. After that meeting, Charger's kindness seemed to grow. He started leaving things for Mark. One morning, Mark mentioned over the radio that he couldn't find a specific brand of coffee he liked. Later that day, he pulled into a small independent diner 500 miles away. The waitress brought him a cup and explained that another man who had just left had paid for it for him. She relayed the message that Mark would know who it was from. Next to the cup was an unopened bag of the exact hard-to-find coffee. Mark felt a chill, but pushed it down. It was just a nice, if strange, gesture. Charger was a thoughtful guy, that's all. But the thoughtful gestures started to feel off. The coincidences became more frequent, more unlikely. Charger would just happen to be at the same fuel island or pulling out of the same warehouse. Mark would mention a plan to take a specific route, and Charger would have a reason to take it too. Mark kept telling himself the country was smaller than it seemed, that truckers run in the same circles, but a feeling in his gut told him something wasn't right. The friendship used to make the miles go faster. Now it just made him nervous. The turning point came one night at a rest stop in the middle of nowhere. It was a last-minute decision, a place he'd never been, and he hadn't announced his stop on the radio. He was settling in for the night when he heard it, the familiar groan of air brakes. He peered out his window, and his blood ran cold. It was Charger's deep green truck, parked directly across from him, the driver's side facing his. The cab's lights were off. He couldn't see a silhouette in the driver's seat, but he knew he was there. He knew he was being watched. He ducked back from the window, his heart hammering. He tried to rationalize it, to find any explanation other than the one staring him in the face. He was just tired, he told himself, seeing patterns that weren't there. It had to be a coincidence. The next time, Mark was in a different state. He had kept his radio off all day, determined to be invisible. As he settled in for the night, the electronic screen of his dispatch unit suddenly lit up, breaking the darkness of the cab with an electronic chime. It was a message from his dispatcher, a man he had worked with for years. The message on the screen made his stomach drop. It was a message for him, using his real name. His boss wrote that a man named Charger had called the main office looking for him, saying it was urgent. The message ended with a simple, terrifying sentence informing him that Charger was at his current location and needed to talk to him. That was it. The rationalization stopped. Charger didn't just know his route, he knew his real name and the company he drove for. His job, the very structure of his life on the road, had been compromised. Mark started altering his routes, driving at odd hours and avoiding major stops. He would pull over on desolate stretches of highway to hide, turning off his engine and sitting in the dark, listening. The vast open road, once a symbol of freedom, now felt like an exposed field where he was constantly being hunted. He started sleeping with a heavy wrench beside his bed, its cold metal a small comfort in the suffocating cab. The fear reached its peak while he was driving through a long, dark canyon. Then, his truck's dashboard made a single, high-pitched electronic chirp, a warning light he'd never seen before. It was likely just a minor electrical fault, but in his heightened state of fear, it was an alarm bell. His hands trembled so much he could barely grip the wheel as he pulled the truck over. Convinced something was wrong, he started tearing the cab apart. Behind the glove box, tucked deep into a mess of wires, his fingers brushed against something that didn't belong. He pulled it out. It was a small black box no bigger than a cigarette lighter and completely silent. As he held it in his palm, a single tiny red light on its surface blinked slowly, rhythmically. He stared at it, his mind racing. He pulled out his phone and Googled the serial number on the back of the device. The results that came back made his blood run cold. It was a GPS tracker. In that horrifying moment of silent discovery, he felt an absolute certainty. This wasn't paranoia. This was an obsession. He went to the authorities immediately. They confirmed the device was registered to a man who had been recently released from prison. That man had been fired from his job for unprofessional conduct. That man was Charger. The restraining order felt like a flimsy piece of paper, a thin shield against a very real danger. Charger's voice was gone from the CB radio, and his truck no longer appeared in the side mirrors. But the fear remained. It was a permanent cold spot in the back of his cab. It was the constant worry about his family's safety, a fear that drove him to lock down all of his social media accounts, erasing his life from the internet. The road, once his sanctuary, had become a prison. He knows that somewhere, out on a lonely stretch of highway, a set of eyes might still be watching. The first hint that something was wrong came over the CB radio. It wasn't an emergency call, just a worried voice cutting through the usual chatter, asking if anyone had seen a Peterbilt with chrome bullhorns on the grill. At first, you don't think much of it. But the same guy came back on an hour later, and this time his voice was tight. He was trying to sound calm, but wasn't doing a good job of it. He said his buddy should have checked in hours ago. The guy wasn't just late, he was missing. The trucker listening was named Alex. He'd been driving this route for 10 years and had heard all the stories about this empty stretch of I-40, tales about truckers who just vanished. He never put any stock in them. But listening to that guy on the radio, a cold knot started twisting in his gut. This felt real. He was fueling up at a Flying J in the middle of nowhere, the air hissing with air brakes and smelling of diesel, when he saw it. Parked at the far end of the lot was the Peterbilt, chrome bullhorns and all. The engine was off, the cab was dark, and it was parked a little crooked, like the driver had been in a hurry. Alex shut his own engine off, and the silence from that truck was just wrong. A parked rig is never completely quiet. You should hear the hum of a refrigerator or something. This one was dead silent. Alex knew he couldn't just leave. You don't leave a fellow driver like that. He walked into the travel center. The guy behind the counter was a skinny kid, maybe 20, staring at his phone and looking bored. Alex went up and asked him about the truck, if he'd seen the driver. The kid barely looked up, just said he saw it pull in a couple days back but hadn't seen anyone, and it wasn't his problem. Alex asked about the security cameras to see if they'd caught anything. The attendant just waved him off, said they were probably busted and the boss handled that stuff anyway. It was clear he wasn't going to get any help there. The kid was just a lazy pain in the neck who couldn't be bothered. Alex went back outside. He walked over to the truck and pulled on the driver's side door. Locked solid. Tried the passenger side. Same thing. He cupped his hands against the window and used the flashlight on his phone to peer inside. The cab was a mess, but a strange kind of mess. A bag of chips was spilled on the passenger seat. A coffee mug in the cup holder had old, pale sludge at the bottom. The bunk in the back was rumpled, the blanket half on the floor. Then his light landed on a picture frame on the dashboard. It was turned face down. Alex felt his heart pound. He knew that picture. He'd seen it in the break room back at the terminal. It was a guy from his company, a good guy who had a wife and 2 little kids. Alex moved his light over to the CB radio. The mic was hanging loose by its cord. On the flat plastic of the handset was a single dark smudge, like a greasy fingerprint someone had tried to wipe away. Alex backed away from the truck and called the police. Then he waited, sitting in his own cab, watching the dark Peterbilt. When the cops finally showed up, one of them walked over, moving slow and looking annoyed. Alex told him everything. The cop went inside to talk to the clerk, then came back out a minute later and shrugged. He said the kids saw nothing and that their hands were tied because it hadn't officially been 24 hours. Alex tried to get them to look inside, telling them something was clearly wrong, but the cop just gave him a line about needing a warrant and how to them it was just a parked truck. They were just going through the motions. He had no choice but to leave. As he pulled his rig back onto the highway, he felt sick to his stomach. He'd done his part, done what any decent driver would do, but it felt useless. He kept picturing that face-down photo and the two little kids in it. The coworker was never found. He's just a story now. The company mentions him once a year in a safety meeting, a bullet point on a slide about situational awareness, but they don't talk about the sick feeling of knowing the whole system is broken. And they don't talk about the question that bothers Alex every single time he pulls into a dark truck stop late at night.